So hello from Green-Mopeds. Today we're going to give you a more in-depth review of the Super Soco TSx after the one that we did on its launch day at the NEC last year. Essentially the TSx is a combination of the Super Soco TS, which was their very first electric motorbike, and the Super Soco TC. In other words, they've taken the mechanics of a Super Soco TC, so the controller and the motor and the batteries, and then put that into a TS body, and that becomes the Super Soco TSx. So before we go into too much detail about that bike, we're just going to put it side by side to a Super Soco TC Max, which is now the sort of upgrade of this bike, if that's the way you might ultimately head. But it does also show some important similarities between the bikes. One of the things to notice is the seat. So the seat on the TC at the back, TT Max rather, is essentially the same as a Super Soco TC seat. And lots of people came to us and said, okay, I like the styling of the Super Soco TS, but they wanted the performance of the TC, and this is why the TSx has come about. But one of the major visual differences between the two bikes was that the TC and the TC Max have this sort of more classic design seat, whereas the TSx has a more sort of sporty seat. It is still meant to be a two-seater. As you can see, there are pegs here for the second person, although you might have to question whether there is actually enough seat space on the back to have the second person, but it is built for two, as is the TC Max and the TC itself. Okay, so going around the bike, the first thing is, let's just talk about the design. So a lot of these panels that you see on all of the Super Soco motorbike ranges are essentially interchangeable. You might have seen on some of the forums that a Super Soco TC Max rider has put on TC panels and made it look more like a TC. That is pretty much the same across all of their bikes. In other words, you could put this on the TC Max and vice versa. These panels will go onto the TC Max and vice versa. So all that's to say is just standardization, which is obviously good for them. The TSx comes in this more two-tone colour. The TS itself had plain colours, which was silver, orange, red, white, black, whereas the TSx comes in this is a grey with silver, there's a black, there's also a rather striking red and an orange, but they all have this sort of two-tone design. This also goes through to the mudguard, which is a new departure for Super Soco, doing this black and silver or black and primary colour two-tone mudguard. As you can see on the TC Max and the TC and the TS, that isn't what actually happens. They have decided to go down this more sort of fancy colour scheme with the stripes and the sort of fluorescent green aspect to the sort of colours, which is, you know, obviously fine. The TSx in red is particularly striking, as you'll see on our other YouTube video. So going around the bike a bit more, a lot of these features are the same on the TS. So the light is the same, the dashboard is still the same. You'll notice that these mirrors here are actually different from the TC Max mirrors. So if we show it from this angle, okay, and the TC, these are more sort of classic round ones. So the TC and the TC Max have these round mirrors, and the TS and TSx have these more angular ones. Okay, not a big issue obviously, but just thought I'd point that out. Handlebars, so you see the handlebars here are raised, which some people have said, could they have those handlebars on a TC Max? Unfortunately not, because of the length of the cables, but as you can see on the TC Max, the handlebars are flat, although the very latest ones, they put a slight kink into them, but not as much as the TSx and TC. Okay, so there are other similar aspects of this bike across all of the Super Soco ranges. For example, you'll see quite a few similar features going around the bike. So for example, the pedals on the TSx, TS and TC are the same. These rear pegs for the extra passenger is the same across all of their motorbike looking bikes. So just back to specs itself. So the TS was a 1200 watts base power bike. Base power means you know, idling if you like, and then there's also maximum power. So the TS had a base power of 1200 watts. This TSX and TC have a base power of 1500 watts. 1500 watts is essentially 2 horsepower. Okay, compare that to the TC Max. The TC Max now has 3.5 kilowatts base and 5 kilowatts max. The TSX and TC have a 1500 watt base and 3 kilowatt max. So essentially what that means is obviously the ability to go fast, the ability to maintain speed going up hills, the ability to easily carry 2 passengers, etc, etc. One thing to say about this bike is that out of the box it comes as a 28 mile an hour bike. Okay, so a moped category bike which you could drive on a pre-2001 driver's license or a CBT. However, you can de-restrict it, and when you de-restrict it you get about 43, 44 out of it. You have to remember though that that is the de-restricted flat out speed. Okay, so that would be, you know, warm conditions, a straight flat road, essentially a lighter person. The TC Max on the other hand, that has got 3 kilowatts base. So this is 3 kilowatts max, that is 3 kilowatts base, and 5 kilowatts max. So the summary of all of that really is, if you want a bike that really goes over 45, then you should be looking at the TC Max. The TSX and TC do about 43, 45 flat out. Okay, so don't expect it to go more than that. It will not go faster than 43, 44. Okay, so that is one of the primary considerations. The other thing also to say about it is actually the price. If, as some people have talked about, you want to take the TSX or the TC with a single battery, and then to get more range you want to add on a second battery, you are almost in the same pricing range as the TC Max at the back. Okay, batteries are about £1,000 each. So when you add the £3,000 that this bike costs plus the £1,000 for the extra battery, that's £4,000, and the TC Max is 4,200. So it's a consideration. What you would get is a bit more miles. So with 2 batteries, the range on this bike would be about 65 to 70 miles, whereas on the TC Max you're looking at about 50. So you would get more range, but you won't get as much power and speed. So it's a trade-off between what do you really want. If you want more range, because you can put a second battery in a TSX and TC, then you would go for the TSX. If you want more speed with a bit less range, you'd go for the TC Max. Okay. So talking of batteries, you get into it through this key here, and underneath this dashboard, lid, you have storage space. You can get the charger in this space and still close the lid, so you can take it, but as you can see, that's about it. Underneath here you see you have the battery, so removable battery, chargeable from a 13 amp plug. So this is the charger here. As you can see, it's a 4 amp charger. Okay, so you simply plug the lead into the top of the battery here. You can obviously take it out. It's locked in to stop anyone from just stealing it, so you can't actually take it out without the key. Or alternatively, you can charge it from this charging point here with the lid closed. Okay, so as I said, this is a 60 volt 30 amp hour battery. The TS was a 60 volt 29 amp hour battery, so they give it more power because it's got a more performant controller. Okay, so here you can see that there is a space for the second battery, and the second battery would go in the other way. Okay, and you can get something called essentially a splitter, which allows you to connect both batteries up to the bike at the same time. It's about £120. Alternatively, you have to pull over and swap the lead from one to the other. it's up to you as to whether you think buying the splitter is a worthwhile investment. Okay, but obviously without the second battery, there is good space there. Take the charger, unfortunately not a helmet, but you could certainly take a a disc lock or something like that, even a chain within that space that you've got. Okay, here you'll notice also that there is a kill switch, and that is the best way to make sure that no battery power is being consumed. Obviously if that's off, then the alarm will not be in operation. Also, you do need to have that switched off if you're charging from the port. Obviously, although it appears to be charging, it won't. Okay, so that is the way to ensure it's being charged. Okay, so with that switch up, this will possibly set off the alarm. No, okay, that's good. So here we have the fob. The fob is obviously to set the alarm and to unlock the bike. You don't need it after that. In other words, you just keep it in your pocket and starts the bike from the power switch. But you will need the fob if you ever turn off the bike. Okay, so don't leave it alone or leave it behind when you take the bike out for a spin. You will need it. So here you can see on the dash itself, we've got the indication of charge on the battery, miles ridden there, and then we've got on the arm here, we've got the ability to change modes. Okay, so essentially what you're doing there is defining how much power goes to the controller, and hence your speed and hence range. So if you have this in mode 1 and it's not de-restricted, then it will go about 12 miles an hour in mode 1, which most people would probably argue is pointless. Mode 2 would get you to about 22, and mode 3 would get you to about 28. And you can just change these at will. Obviously there's no clutches on these bikes, so you can just change it as you wish. The only thing to say about that is that if, for example, you were sort of full throttle on mode 1 and you didn't release and went straight to 3, it would obviously try to get to full speed in mode 3. So you might, when you're riding it, just ease off a little bit when you change modes. But other than that, you can change it as you wish. So that's all about saving range and then speed. Okay, so the thing that's although this bike is now on, as you see, there is the throttle isn't active because we're in parked mode, and parked mode is set by a sensor in the side stand, and if the side stand was flicked up and the power button here was pressed in, this would change to ready, and then the throttle would be active and away it would go. So no noise, obviously. So the range, as I said, is about 40 miles on paper. In reality, that's going to be more like 30-35 miles. That is typical that you knock off 10 to 20% from any quoted ranges that you see on any electric bikes and on cars too, as I'm sure you appreciate. As we go around the bike, just some other things to point out, one of which are just slight changes from the TC. This was a bugbear of a few people, that they had a nice S logoed plastic cap on the end of the arm there. Those used to fall off quite a lot, so they've now replaced it with a rubber one. A minor detail, but something that will save people some grief. The biggest difference in this bike from the TC, other than the design, is actually that they've now incorporated ventilated discs. On the TC, they are not ventilated, so some people were talking about how they used to squeak, which is essentially just that they need cleaning, but they've now improved that by having ventilated discs, and obviously that gives better performance as well as hopefully less squeaking. Okay, so again, coming round, front has got discs as well. Notice here that there are 2 leads going into the brake caliper, and that's because this is CBS. So CBS is combined braking system, which means that pulling the brake lever, this one, will brake both the front and back wheel together. Okay, ABS is obviously the alternative, and these bikes at the lower range of the total electric bike range don't have them as yet, but CBS is a sort of mandated requirement for 125cc bikes anyway now. So this is just the back brake, so remember that CBS, front and back, or just back. Okay, so in terms of charging time, the quoted charging time is about 7 to 8 hours. That's from flat, and you typically wouldn't let the battery go flat. If you did happen to be riding it and the battery went flat, and you would cruise to a halt. There would be nothing other than that. It wouldn't, stop suddenly or whatever. It would just cruise to a halt. Okay, so other than the fact that you're doing it, it's not a dangerous aspect of electric bikes. Just as a comparison to show you, this is what you get in a TC Max. So the whole battery compartment is full of a battery, 72 volt battery, so a lot more. Okay, so essentially that's it. As you can see, it's now a lot more stylish bike, even though not a lot has changed in the actual frame of the bike or anything like that. In fact, nothing has changed. The colour scheme has made it quite a lot more sporty compared to the TS, with the extra power that you get. So in comparison, a de-restricted TS would get you to about low 30s, whereas this one will get you to sort of low 40s, which is a good increase in power for riding in 40-mile-an-hour roads or even 50-mile-an-hour roads now. So I hope that gives you some insight into how these bikes now are looking. If you want to have any more details, please feel free to contact us. Thanks very much.